Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all doing great. Welcome to the first session of your F1 chapter, that is Business and Technology, previously known as Accountant in Business, that is the AB subject. Allow me to very briefly introduce myself. I am Shilpi Jain, ACCA, and I've been taking up various subjects of ACCA like the SBL, this subject, and your FM subject for the last 5 years now. So I have good, experience in terms of teaching these subjects, as well as I'm an ACCA myself. So I know what it requires to pass your ACCA paper. Now this particular subject, the BT subject, is extremely special, this being the first paper of your ACCA journey. Now because this is the first paper, it definitely, lays the foundation towards all other papers in your ACCA journey. Now before we actually dive deeper into the subject, let's just very quickly go through some housekeeping rules of the class. So the sessions are going to be live online. My endeavor is to always make my sessions extremely interactive. So the more you talk, the more you ask questions, the more clarity you're going to get in these sessions, right? And this particular subject that we're dealing with is something that, we can actually relate to a lot in the real life world as well. So yes, definitely it's a very interesting subject that we are dealing with here. So the way the session is going to be conducted is that I will be talking, I will be speaking, I will be, explaining a lot of real life examples, looking at, what sort of questions can be asked up in a particular chapter that we'll be dealing with, and at the same time looking at, what is the examination technique going to be able to pass these papers. And you, on the other hand, are gonna listen, understand, and most important here is to ask a lot of doubts, ask if anything you want me to repeat, ask, if you have anything that you want me to explain again, I'll be more than happy to do so. So just make use of the chat box facility right here, and you can drop in any query you have whatsoever in the chat box. I'll repeat your query and then I'll answer your query. Why I'm not asking you to unmute yourself is because sometimes your audio might not be audible to the other students. So the best approach is to just drop in your query in the chat box, and I can repeat your question and then I can answer your question. I hope that is okay with everyone. Let's just quickly have a round of okay in the chat box so that everybody becomes familiar with how to make use of the chat box. Or if you have any doubt whatsoever so far, please feel free to drop in your doubt. Wonderful. So I've got an okay from almost everyone in the class. So that's just great. So let's proceed. Right, so now let me introduce the subject to you, Business and Technology. This being the first paper in your ACCA journey is going to lay a lot of foundation towards your other papers. So this subject, this technical knowledge that you're going to gain here is going to be tested in your, on your CBE exam window. So we have to get that approach to be able to clear this paper, and then this particular paper is going to lay the foundation towards your professional level paper, Strategic Business Leader. I'm the trainer for SBL as well, so I know that this subject is directly related to your SBL paper, which is the compulsory paper at your professional level. So something that, the more better and the more crisp your knowledge is here, the better you're going to be at your SBL paper as well at the professional level. So be sure that, you're going to make in a lot of effort to be able to clear not just this paper, but your overall concepts as well, because this is something which is going to be the foundation towards your SBL paper. So today I'm just going to start with the examination technique. So we'll introduce the subject, we'll look at what is it that we are actually heading into, what is it, we are looking at, what sort of concepts we required, what the exam is going to look like, and how are we going to approach the exam. So very important session wherein we'll get familiar with the exam of Business and Technology. I hope you're not confused that that this paper was previously called your AB paper, or if you're coming via the FIA route in ACCA, then this paper is called the Foundation in Accountancy Business. So FAB or AB, as we previously used to call it, is the same subject which we now call BT, that is Business and Technology. So let's very quickly understand that what is this subject all about? What is it that we are actually heading into? So the overall aim of the Accountant and Business syllabus is to introduce the accountancy firmly in the context as a central business function. So we know that, for every business to be able to survive, you need to understand that accountancy is one aspect, business technology accountancy is one aspect which is extremely well integrated into into any business being successful. So if I want my business to be successful, I have to give due diligence to the accountancy profession in my business. I have to give due diligence to the operations. I have to give due diligence to the technology part which is going to run and thrive the business. So that is why this paper is very important, not just as laying down your foundation for ACCA, but also which is going to help you become an entrepreneur that you could become after having cleared your ACCA. So yes, this entire syllabus is going to encompass business organization. So you're going to understand that what business organization is all about. You're going to understand what do you mean by the term stakeholders. You're going to understand what do you understand by the term business environment, what all it encompasses. So I'm talking here both about the internal environment as well as the external environment. How am I going to study this environment? How am I going to, understand that what are the factors both internally as well as externally from the environment that impact me as a business, and how my decisions are going to alter depending upon what is happening in the macroeconomic environment, as we call it. Then we're going to have a look at the business structure, the functions, the governance role, and very important angle of social responsibility. I'm just going to quickly ask you a question here. So what do you think here? Why are we putting, we are looking at, how to run businesses, how to operate businesses. So what is this angle of social responsibility being added onto corporates? So supposingly you're part of an organization, we'll just take an example. Supposingly you're part of Reliance Industries. Why? It's an entity, right? It's like a non-living, human being. It's a legal entity, but why are we imposing the concept of social responsibility onto our businesses now? Why do you think it is so important? Why do you think that, businesses need to realize that they are not just only taking in from the environment, from the society that they operate in, but also it is their responsibility to give it back to the environment in which we are operating, and thus undertake activities under social responsibility. Any idea? Anything anybody has ever heard of it? Corporate social responsibility term familiar with anyone? Okay, let me just try and understand what is basically that what is your starting level. So this is like your first paper of ACCA that you're giving, or have you done like F2 and F3 previously, or is this the first paper that you're heading into? So just give me a quick heads up into what you all have done so far. First paper. Great. So you are all raw then. You are all new to the ACCA curriculum. So my responsibility is not just only to make you familiar with the technical and the conceptual part of how you're going to be tested in the exam, but also make you familiar with a lot of aspect of the ACCA qualification as well, right? So I'm not sure whether you know or not, but I also head the ACCA division at VG Learning. So you can always reach out to me for any queries you have with respect to not just this paper, but also generally as well towards your ACCA qualification. There's a WhatsApp group that we've already created. I'm sure you all are part of this WhatsApp group. So let's keep interacting with each other so that you become more familiar with what is it that you're actually heading into. Right? I hope you all are familiar with the fact that this exam is going to be a computer-based exam. It's an on-demand computer-based exam, which simply means that as soon as you are ready with your preparation, you can actually go down and book your paper and attempt it. So you do, like, unlike your skills or your professional level paper, you do not have to wait for the quarterly cycle here. You can sit down for your exam as soon as you think you're ready to give the exam. So that is one aspect of the paper, just to like give you a heads up into how you can actually approach the exam and when is it that you can actually book the exam. So what we're going to do is that we're going to go through the entire syllabus. And then you will be, required to, during the present pandemic, the ACCA is giving the option to give you the remote exam from home as well. Or you could, walk down to any of the CBE approved centers and give this paper as well. Right? Is that okay with everyone? Any doubts so far? Anything anybody would like to ask? Any doubts so far? Sapna says yes, so that's a yes for a doubt, or what, Sapna? I think I'm asking multiple questions. Okay, so Sapna says no. No doubt, no doubt. Okay, wonderful. So I think I can proceed then. So yes, we were talking about the content or basically the how the structure of your this BT paper is divided. So we're going to be looking at social responsibility angle given to businesses, which simply means the corporate social responsibility angle is extremely important for businesses to understand that you're not just taking from the society, from the country, from the globe, from the environment at large, but it is also your responsibility to give it back to the society at large, because you are even though you're not like a human being, you are a corporate citizen, in which it simply means that you should hold yourself accountable, you should hold yourself responsible towards your nation, towards your society, towards your environment, towards your globe at large. We'll be doing all of these chapters one by one in detail. I'm just only going through your syllabus breakdown basically, just to make you familiar with in terms of that, what is it that we are heading into. Accounting and its relationship with other business functions, audit and internal control, people management issues, as well as effectiveness and communications and professional ethics in business environment. Believe you me, because I am the trainer for SBL as well, all of these topics which I've just read, which are showing on your screen, are exactly going to be copy pasted in your SBL paper as well. Obviously at a very, very high depth knowledge level there, it is going to be very vast there in your SBL paper at the professional level, but this is where you're going to be laying the foundation. So a lot of brought forward knowledge from this particular paper will be assumed that you have in your SBL paper. So prepare for this paper not just only from your F1's perspective, not just from your BT's perspective only, but from the perspective of preparing yourself, getting that basic knowledge towards your SBL paper as well. So all of these topics extremely, extremely important. Okay, so now let's have a look at what the exam is going to look like and what is our approach towards this exam, this BT exam is going to be like. So this FAB, AB or BT paper, as we now call it, is a 2-hour computer based exam. So it's going to be a 2-hour exam that you have to sit down for. You obviously have to appear for this exam on your computer. There is a wide range of question types that you're going to be asked here, including multiple choice questions are going to be there. So like you'll be given a question and there are going to be 4 multiple choice, answers given to you, and you have to choose the correct option out of it. It could be a number entry, which simply means that you have to, do some calculations and put down the correct answer, the correct number as your answer. Multiple responses, which simply means that the correct response doesn't have to be necessarily always just one out of the 4 options. It could be more than one options which are correct. So you have to choose the multiple correct responses as well. Multiple response matching, which simply means you'll be given like 4 parts of the question here and you have to match it with 4 correct options. So A matches with option 4, B matches with option B. All of these types of questions are going to be tested. Pick list and hotspots as well. So they're going to be, we're going to go through each of these different types of questions one by one to familiarize ourselves with what the exam could possibly, throw at us. So what different types of questions can be possibly asked and what is going to be our approach towards all of these different type of questions that are there. So we're going to look at all of this. So the exam structure now. So there are going to be 2 sections in your exams. It's going to be a 100-mark exam. Section A is going to have 30 2-mark objective test questions and 16 1-mark objective test questions, making it a total of 76 marks that you're going to be tested in your section A. So 30 questions of 2 marks each and 16 questions of 1 mark each are going to be comprised in your section A questions. Section B is going to be 6 4-mark multiple task questions in one on each area of the syllabus that we've just done so far. So it's going to have 6 questions of 4 mark each, which is going to be involving multiple tasks that you are required to do on your system. We're going to have a look at a full-fledged question paper to have a look and feel as to what the exam is going to look and feel like. We're going to be doing complete mock exam at the end of your syllabus as well, so that you're well prepared and there are absolutely no surprises towards your exam. So the approach, my simple approach, see, if I'm teaching professional level paper, I'm teaching skills level paper as well, so I'm teaching FM as well, and this is the knowledge level paper I'm teaching, so I know what to expect in the exam and what would be the best approach to tackle the exam as well. This paper being at the foundation level, at the knowledge level is a very, very basic, you can say, knowledge being tested. So do not go deeper into concepts more than what is actually required, because this entire syllabus which I've just shown you is gonna be tested at a very, very wide, you can say vast scope when you actually head towards your SBL paper. So A, we have to always make sure that we know the correct approach towards the exam, and B, do not stress yourself more than what is actually required towards your paper. So that is the simple approach that we're going to follow towards your BT exam. Any doubts so far? Anything anybody would like to ask regarding how the exam is going to be structured and how we're going to approach the exam? Any questions? Anybody wants to ask anything? Okay, so I'm getting no doubts. Wonderful. So let's proceed. Okay, since all of you have just told me that this is going to be like your first ACCA paper, so apart from just technical knowledge, about just, having a look at, okay, what the syllabus area is talking about, you will also have to develop the skill to be able to manage this computer-based exam. Have any one of you ever given an exam on the computer itself? So anybody is familiar with the concept of computer-based exam, how, what sort of approach you're going to follow and how the exam looks like? Because believe you me, a lot of students, even though they have full technical knowledge, they know the syllabus, They panic at the day of the exam because you have to actually handle, an entire exam on the computer itself. So apart from technical knowledge, you need to hold on to your nerves. You need to get the right skill set to be able to, develop these skills to be able to handle an exam on the computer itself, right? So that is also something that you will be required to develop towards your AB journey, towards your BT journey as well. Okay, so how does this computer-based exam actually work? The questions are obviously going to be displayed on the monitor. As a candidate, you're required to enter the answer directly onto the computer itself. Candidates are gonna have 2 hours to be able to complete this 100-mark question paper on your computer. Candidate sitting exams on demand are provided with the provisional result notification showing the results before leaving the examination room itself. So as soon as you actually finish off your exam on the computer, at the same time only you get a provisional result of a pass or a fail and how much you've scored on it at the very same time itself. So you know whether you've been able to clear the exam or not. One important thing I would like to mention here is that, God forbid, you're not able to clear your exam in the first attempt. Do not get disheartened. Sit back, work upon your weaknesses, because you've literally given the first exam for ACCA, and then you can rebook your exam at any time whenever you are more confident, you know what your weaknesses were and how you're going to be able to cope them up. But I'm sure that none of you will be able to, will be in this position to be requiring to rebook your exam, provided there's one condition, that you're going to be giving me 100% honesty in your efforts, in your, in your study, as much as I'm going to be giving from my end. So it has to work both ways around, right? Okay, so let's have a look at it. The candidates sitting are going to be given a provisional result. The CBE License Center uploads the result to the ACCA as proof of the candidate's performance within the 72 hours. So it will start reflecting in your MyACCA account as well. Candidates sitting the option exams will receive their results approximately 5 weeks after the exam sitting, once they have been expert marked. So you get your provisional result there itself, and your actual MyACCA account gets updated within 5 weeks when when an expert has actually gone through your script as well. Candidates can check their exam status on the ACCA website by logging on to your MyACCA account. I'm sure you're all familiar with your, what the MyACCA account is like. Everybody is logged on to their MyACCA account once. Everybody familiar with your ACCA and ID, user IDs, and how to use the MyACCA account? Okay, so that's a yes from everyone. So that's wonderful. Prachi has not done it. So Prachi, please do it. Log on to your MyACCA account. Just maneuver around that, what are the functionalities of it, because that is going to be your centralized, you can say, reservatory of towards your ACCA journey. So everything that you're going to do is going to start updating on that online portal itself. So Sapna and Shivani and Anuj, Prachi, okay, so 4 of you have not logged on as yet. So please just do that. Go through your MyACCA account. Let me just quickly show it to you, just in case you're not familiar with it. So accaglobal.com is where you go. This is your MyACCA account. So just press on MyACCA. You would have received an email directly from ACCA informing you about your username and password towards your ACCA. So just please fill it in, and that's about it. You've literally logged on, right? So just check your credentials, check your, anything that you need to do has to be done via this portal. So this is very, very important for you to familiarize yourself with it. Okay, let's get back to the subject. Okay. Right. So this is done. Right, so now we're gonna learn about the technique of handling these multiple choice questions. Now I know that, there is one question given, there are gonna be four options given to you. You have to identify the correct option out of these four. So what is the approach that you're gonna use here is going to be that out of these four options given, only one is the correct option, right? And the other three options which are given to you, they all are going to look like the plausible answer. They all are going to look like as if they are the correct answer. So we term them as distractors, because even though they are not the right answer, they actually try to distract the student. They actually try to, lure the student to mark it as correct option. So it will look as the correct answer, but you have to use your brain. You have to, use your skill to be able to identify the correct option out of the four options given to you. So how are you going to do that? Step one would be to skim read all the multiple choice questions and identify what appears to be the easier questions. So you're going to be asked your 30 multiple choice questions and then another 16 multiple choice questions. So you're going to be having a lot of questions. Just skim read these questions. There are always going to be some very, very easy questions there in your exam. What do you need to do? At the end of the day, you want to pass your paper, right? So out of the 100 marks that are going to be tested, you literally just only require 50 passing marks, right? So you literally just need to get like 50% of the questions correct to be able to pass your paper. So which 50% are you going to concentrate upon first? The difficult questions or the easy questions? Obviously, you're going to filter the easy marks first. Get them out of your way. Make sure that, I have done at least 60 marks of questions, which I am very, very confident upon. Now I'm remaining with the tough 40 marks of questions. Now, whatever time I have left out of the 2 hours given to me, I am now going to try and, gauge and get in the maximum questions out of these difficult 40 marks, which I've been able to identify for myself. So simply what you have to do is that attempt each question starting with the easier questions identified in step 1, which when you actually skim read the entire paper, right? Now, looking before, what you need to do is to read the questions thoroughly. You may prefer to work out the answers before looking on the options, or you may prefer to look at the options at the beginning itself. Adopt the method that whatsoever works best for you. My approach is that whenever I'm, in my step 1, whenever I'm skim reading the question, I just literally read the requirements only. I do not actually jump on to the 4 options, because if I just read everything in the first place, I'm literally wasting a lot of time. So only I'm going to just read through the questions. Whatsoever I'm able to identify as easier topics, easier questions, something that I know of directly, I can then start answering these questions. So that actually increases the probability of you getting those easy 50 marks in the 100 marks question paper which has been given to you. So that just makes it very, very doable. That just makes it very, very higher probability of you passing your paper, and that's exactly what you want, right? At the end of the day, what is going to matter is a pass or a fail. So that's exactly what our exam technique is going to be like, that how do we get these 50 marks that we want? How do we get this pass that we want in our ACCA paper, right? So thereafter, in your step 3, you're going to read the options and see if one matches your own answer. So I'm just trying to pick which is the correct option, really, right? Be careful with numerical questions, as the distractors, that is the 3 incorrect options which are there, are designed to match answers that incorporate common errors. So, the examiner is very intelligent. So the examiner is going to make some silly mistake, like you could also make in your exam. putting that number in, the examiner is going to put that, the answer as one of the plausible answers. Now, if you make the same mistake which the examiner was trying to, fool you with, you end up getting an answer which matches your answer as well. However, you have actually made the same silly common error which the examiner expected you to make. So the three incorrect options which are there, they are not going to be like completely out of the world or something that, they are completely unrelated. They are all going to be distractors which could come into the picture if a minor mistake has been made from your end. So be very, very cautious as to all your, calculations or your thought process of choosing the correct option has to be 100% correct, so that out of the 4 questions which are there, you are able to identify the stem, that is the correct answer out of the 4 options given to you, and not getting distracted by the distractors of the paper which have been given already. So check that your calculation is correct. Have you followed the requirement exactly? Have you actually included every stage of the calculation that was actually required? So that is literally how we actually arrive at the correct option, right? Is that okay with everyone? Any doubt here? Everybody okay? Any doubts? Please let me know if anything anybody wants to ask, anything you want me to repeat. Okay, wonderful. So just wanted to run this basic exam technique with you once. Now that we've done it, let's just literally hop on to our questions. Let me just open up. I'm going to just quickly, before I actually, start teaching, I'm going to show you what an exam actually looks like. Obviously, this is like on your, it's an exam. So this is a mock exam, which is latest one applicable to you. So there are all questions which are compulsory, section A as well as section B questions. There are no options that you can actually leave out on. Okay, so we already have gone through these steps. Now this is also something very important. Let me just quickly actually read through this. So we obviously read through the questions. We start with the easier one. We read the options. We reread, the question to make sure that you are actually understanding the question well and answering the requirement. And if you're still not sure, and literally you don't know what to do and what not to do, you just continue to the next question, drop dead the question, move on to the next question. And at the end of the question, when you've literally attempted whatever you knew of, you still got some time, but the remaining questions, supposedly there are 10 marks of the question that you literally do not understand and it just doesn't make any sense to you. What do you do with these questions? Do you just leave them unanswered? What do you think is something that you should be doing? Rough idea? Give me a shot. What do you think? What should be your approach for questions that you just are completely blank of? Do we just leave these questions? Or what better should we do? So no says Anuj. Ankit says skip them for a while. So yes, you've skipped them for a while. You've attempted the entire question paper that you know of now. But now you've literally attempted everything that you knew of. And this 10 marks question you have no idea of. You've still got time. The best approach now is to just give a fluke of an answer, just guess the answer, put anything that makes any sort of sense to you. Why? Because worst out of worst, if it's an MCQ question, you've got 1/4 of the probability, that is 25% probability of getting the right answer by just guessing it, because there is absolutely no negative marking here. So why should I not make a fair shot at a guess of a question with having 25% probability of actually marking the correct option rather than leaving the question completely unanswered? So obviously what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer every question regardless of whether I actually knew the correct answer or not, because there is going to be no penalization or no negative marking in your exams. And with marking an option, you are at least getting yourself a 25% probability of having hit the correct option. So you might get a 2 marks, or worst to worst you were anyways getting 0, right? So that is one thing that you must always remember, is to never ever leave any question unanswered, right? Is everybody okay with it? Does everybody understand this? That never leave a question unanswered. So never ever do that, please, right? That's right, Shivani, that we should not leave them, and we should at least, give it one rough shot. At the end of the exam, when, I'm done with everything that I actually knew, and I still, have got time, and I don't have any idea of these questions, so I'm just going to give it a rough shot. So everybody needs to attend this 100 marks of the question paper. Okay. So I'm just going to very quickly scroll down what exactly the questions, and what exactly is going to be the structure of the questions which are going to be asked to you. So what do we have here? We have section A, which is worth 76 marks. Each question is either worth a 1 marker or a 2 marker, and all the questions are compulsory. So you've got one question followed by 4 options. You need to tick the correct option here and move on to the next question. Then in question could be wherein you have to fill in the blank. Again, you have to tick the correct option and move on to the next question. Then now this question says that you have to identify 2 statements which are actually true. So out of these 4, which 2 are your correct options? So you have to mark them as tick, and that means that you're choosing them as to the true statement. Then again, we have MCQ questions giving us a question directly, and we have to just choose the correct option out of the options given to us. So very simple, very doable. Believe you me, this is right at the basic level of your ACCA. So this is an extremely doable paper. This is easy paper, but having called it easy doesn't mean that you think you can pass without following what I'm telling you to do in the class. So that is something that you have to take for granted, that you will definitely be required to study and get good conceptual knowledge. Okay, so there you are. These are the kind of questions that you're going to be tested. Question, options to select from. Questions, options to select from. Now these could be one of the type of questions is this as well, wherein out of these options given to you, which combination is the right answer you have to choose. So 1, 2 and 3, is it the right answer? 1, 2 and 4, is it the right answer? 2 only is the correct option, or 1 and 2 only is the correct option. So you could be asked questions like this as well. The reason why I am showing you the question paper in the first class itself, because I want you to be familiar with what we are heading into, with what technique do we require to prepare ourselves for, right? So again, questions, just choose and keep on moving ahead. So nice and easy, fill in the blanks questions wherein you need to choose the correct option that is going to fill the blank. Okay, move. Types of questions, choose the correct option. Okay, now one very important question to understand here is that sometimes the examiner doesn't ask a direct question. So you could also be asked a question wherein you have to answer what is not there, what is not the correct option. So like this question here, which of the following is not true? So what does not true mean? Tell me, what do you mean what you have to choose here? What does not true mean? So sometimes, we always just presume that we have to choose something which is like the true answer or the correct option. But here, the examiner has literally asked you to choose something which is not true. Not true means something which is false, right? So be very, very careful while reading the requirements of the question as to what is it exactly that you have to do. Do you have to choose the correct option or do you have to choose the incorrect option? Because if I do not read the question correctly and I just presume the question that it is going to be asking me, obviously you're going to be selecting the incorrect option and losing easy marks in the paper. Right? So be very, very familiar, be very, very careful here. Again, a negatively marked question. So this is not an advantage. So instead of asking an advantage, you are asking which is not an advantage. So you could be asked such questions. Okay, so this is what the exam is going to look like. Now that we've done with 46 questions of section A, let's move on to section B, which is worth 24 marks, and have a look and feel into what this is going to be looking like. So this is going to be worth 4 marks each. So all 6 questions are obviously compulsory and you have to attend. There is no option in your BT paper. So there is a very small scenario given to you. On the basis of this scenario, you have to answer question number A, question number B, as well as these 2 questions are linked to the same little paragraph mentioned here. So what's happening? It's a 4-marker question broken down into 2 parts of 2 marks each, totaling 4 marks in total. So what do I have? So I have got one simple information given to me and then followed by 2 sets of questions here worth 4 marks in all. Similarly, I've got another question lined up here with further 2 parts splitting into 2 marks each. So another 4-marker question here. Then you have one more question. Again, a small scenario given to you, followed by 2 questions wherein you have to choose what is literally happening. So the pick list is given to you. So remember in my theory, in my introduction of the types of questions, I had actually mentioned here, right, that you could be asked pick list questions as well. So this is what it means, what a pick list question is. Let's open up the pick list question again. Where is my question? Okay, there you are. So wherein pick list is that country A, I could pick up that is going to be recession. Country B, I could pick depression. Country C, I could pick up recovery. Country D, I could pick up boom. So it is picking up the correct option from the list, which is called a pick list question. And then, okay, so here in this question, I have to select 4 features of structural unemployment. So I have to mark 4 options out of the options which are given to me. Right? Nice and easy. So for this question, for every statement, I have to choose whether it is a true or is it a false. So make sure that you are actually giving an answer for each one of these statements, because that is how you're going to be gaining your 2 marks here. Okay, so again, we have to pick up the 4 terms in the boxes below that relate to professional qualities. So out of these 8 options given here, which 4? So I would just press it and it would just turn up gray in the exam, and this is how you have to select your 4 boxes out of the 8 given to you. So this is another question. You look at and choose, out of tall and flat, which one does it actually abide to. So that is how you would be looking at each one of these questions, and this is how you're going to be tackling your 24-mark questions of section B. Right? Is everybody now familiar with what the exam is going to look like? Any questions anybody has regarding the format of the exam, please feel free to ask. Any doubts? Anything anybody would like to ask? Any questions here? The difference of square and circle for MCQ and multiple response will be present in exam. What does that mean, Prachi? What's a square and a circle? It's just that we have to just choose. You have to just click on it and it is going to be marked. Yes, so that is just for options. So like this has circles on it. So if you think that this is a psychological factor, so I just press on here and it will be chosen. This is just for you to choose the correct option, right? Is that okay, Prachi? Okay. Yes, so there could be a square as well. So this is a circle question. Let me show you a square. So out of this, you have to choose 4 boxes. So if I just put down, if I just go on timeliness and click it, this is obviously not the computer, right? So this is just like a PDF version which I'm showing it to you of the exam. So if you just click on it, it just chooses. It's that simple as that. There is no difference between it being in a square form or it being in a circle form, right? So like here, out of these 8 squares given to me, I have to choose 4, which I feel is the correct option. So it doesn't make any difference as to what shape it is. As long as you click on it, it is going to be marked. Right, Prachi? Any other question? Anybody wants to ask anything? Just wanted to run you through the exam pattern and what is it that we're gonna prepare ourselves for. Okay, that's wonderful that everybody's done it. So I'm just gonna now open up the slides and start with the subject itself. Okay. Right, so this is something that you should all be familiar with. This is just to how to read your book. Okay, one very important question, in fact, why nobody asked me as yet, that which books are we supposed to refer? I'm surprised nobody asked me this question as of now. So let me just put down in the chat box, everybody needs to purchase BPP workbook and practice and revision kit. You could purchase this from the team at VG Learning itself. So the number you need to reach out is 9599983116, or you could email at ACCA helpdesk at vglearningdestination.com. So what you could do is that you could actually, they've got books presently running at a discount and at a huge discount from the printed price. You can easily purchase that book because even though it was valid only until June 2021, there is no change in the syllabus as such. So you can very easily refer to the same set of the syllabus and just buy it at a discounted price as well, right? So Shivani has just received it. That's just wonderful. And for those of you who haven't got it as yet, please just buy these books. Let me show it to you how the book is going to look like. So we have got this workbook. So this is the workbook that you need to purchase. It's from the content from ACCA approved content provider, which is BPP. Okay, so this is the book that you can buy, obviously in the physical form. And this is gonna be very, very important for you to be able to pass your paper. Each and every, you can say, word or line written in this book is extremely, extremely important for you. So the way I have drawn my presentation slides is entirely based upon the same set of content that we'll be making use of in the from the book itself. So this is how it looks like. Okay. So yes, BT is very, very important from the overall qualification of ACCA, because it teaches us very, very important grounds, or to be an accountant, to be, a future business leader. So it's going to teach us the role of accounting. It's going to teach us about control and fraud. It's going to teach us about business environment. It's going to teach us about management and HR, that is your human resources. It's going to teach us about employment, corporate governance, data protection, health and safety, and very, very important business ethics that each one of you as a future accountant needs to develop, needs to be aware of, and be able to apply it practically in your life as well. So yes, this paper is extremely well suited into your, you being groomed to become a qualified ACCA professional. So the syllabus area is broken down into 6 parts. Part A talks about something that we've just literally done. So these are the 6 parts of the syllabus. I'm not going to repeat it. Just quickly look at the slide. Okay, let me just actually do it on a full screen basis. Okay. So this is what it looks like, the exam format. Yes, we are familiar with now. We know what to expect, the types of questions as well. We've just done it when we've actually done through the technique of handling the exam as well. Very, very important here is the resources. How do I basically prepare myself for the exam? Apart from the BPP workbook and practice and revision kit, which I've just shown to you, what other resources are available to you? So you can reach out to the examining team articles which are given in your student accountant. You have to reach out to the ACCA's website. Let me just actually show it to you here. So I'm again on accglobal.com. You are a student, so go under students, go under study support resources. So here, just press on that. You are in your ACCA qualification, so just select that. You are doing your business and technology paper, so just select that. Now these are all resources which are available to you absolutely free directly from ACCA. So please make use of them. I've just shared the link for directly this BP page resources on the chat box. So there you are. So make sure that you go through all of this introduction, the examining team guidance, the syllabus which I've just shown to you, and then this is something which is absolutely important. Practice test. You cannot think of, literally booking your BT exam before having gone through your practice test, before actually having gone through these specimen exams, before having gone through these technical articles. So these 3 parts here are extremely, extremely important before you even think of booking your BT exam by logging onto your system. So make sure that you've done lots and lots of practice on, what the exam is going to look like, how you're going to be attempting full-fledged exams. So these practice tests, you can actually just move on to these. So these test series here, I highly recommend you to purchase this set of 3 tests here, and you must do it before you actually sit for your exam. It's very economical. It's at a very, reasonable price. So, but the 3 set of tests you literally need to purchase for yourself once we are actually done with the entire syllabus. What the specimen exam looks like, I've just literally shown it to you. Then these are few technical articles which are written by the examiner, which are over and above your book knowledge, but something, because the examiner has literally, spared out time and written these articles, you cannot actually ignore them, right? So these 4, things which are mentioned here is something that you should definitely be well familiar with. So these are all available to you right on your ACCA's website itself under your study support resources. So please just, utilize these resources and increase your chances of passing the paper. The global pass rate for your BT paper is an extremely high percentage. So it's always been, more than 80%. So believe you me, these 80% of the students are the ones who've literally listened to their trainer, followed the instructions given, done the practice test, gone through the specimen exams, gone through the technical articles. And if you do all of this, you can take my word for it that you will surely fall under this 80% of, 80 odd percent of the students who literally pass their paper. And that is exactly what we have to do, right? At the end of the day, you and I want to pass the paper. So that is something that we should be, achieving or looking at from day one itself. That how is it and what is it that I need to do to be able to pass this paper. So these are all the resources which I just shown to you. Okay. So now let's move on to the skills which we are requiring. Learning and understanding the syllabus, obviously very important. Time management, you've only got 2 hours. 2 hours for the 100 marks that you have to attempt. If you end up in a situation where you've literally just covered like 60% of the questions, do you think you're going to pass? No, right? So very, very important is to give yourself the correct time management. Okay, so I want you to tell me you've got 2 hours, which means how much minutes? 2 hours is how much minutes? How many minutes do you have? You've got 120 minutes, right? So you've got 120 minutes to attempt 100 marks. So how much does that mean? How many minutes do you have per mark? How many minutes do you have per mark? So that's 1.2 minutes per mark. 120 minutes divided by 100 marks which you have to attempt, right? So you've got 1.2 minutes per mark. And if it's a 2-marker question, how many minutes do you spend on it? How many minutes do you spend on a 2-marker question? Absolutely nothing more than 2.4 minutes on it, right? As soon as your 2.4 minutes are over and you haven't done the question, drop dead the question, move on to the next question. Because believe you me, if you were not able to do it in the stipulated 2.4 minutes, it's just not worth, spending a minute more on it. Because ACCA exams right from this paper itself are extremely, extremely time bound. So as soon as, you go on to your next levels, your skills level, your professional level, you will understand, you will acknowledge that, okay, these exams are not easy peasy, right? I really, really need to groom myself to be able to handle these questions well. So very important is to get time management bang on from day one itself. Is everybody familiar with it now? So we're not going to spend anything more than 1.2 minutes per mark whenever we are doing questions as practice at home, right? Tackling the objective test questions is something that I've just mentioned to you, and tackling the multiple task questions is something that you should again be familiar with. And this will only, it just doesn't come to you while sleeping one day. This will only and only come with question practice. So there's absolutely no, you can say there is no shortcut to actual hardcore preparation which is there. Okay. So skills, we know we need to develop practical application skills. We need to develop good theoretical knowledge skill as well, because it's not just only going to be about that, basically just content. You also will be required to be able to apply this knowledge in your, straightforward scenarios which are going to be given to you. So very important skill that you need to learn here. Time management, okay, we've just mentioned 1.2 minutes per mark. I am just not going to overrun. Section B, I'm not going to spend more than 30 minutes. Section A, I'm not going to spend more than 90 minutes. Allocating this 1.2 minutes per mark. If the answer is not obvious, that's precisely what I mentioned. Just move on. Drop dead the question. Move on. It's just not worth spending more time on it. You can always come back to it if having, at the end of the exam, you still have time left. You can always come back to this particular question. Let me just quickly sanitize myself. Very important to remain safe. Okay. How do I actually tackle these objective test questions is something that I've just mentioned. So we know the skill already, and your objective test questions again as well. Like I said, you've got a 25% chance of getting the right option. So please just, if nothing is something that, if you just don't know the answer, just at least take a rough shot, because you'll get 25% chance of getting the right answer. Multiple task questions, you obviously, you have to be very focused. You don't have to be frightened by, oh my God, I've got so much to do. Do not do that, There is just going to be simple information given to you and simple to do tasks. Please just maintain your calm, your composure to be able to tackle these questions. Okay, so now we're going to start with syllabus area A. Before I actually start, if there's anything anybody wants to ask, please utilize this opportunity to ask question if you have any, or are we good to start with the first syllabus area A? Very quickly, please let me know. Drop in your queries in the chat box, or drop in the fact that if we are good to go ahead with our first syllabus area. Okay, so I'm waiting for your responses. Are we good to go ahead? I've only got Shivani's response. What about others? Are we good to go ahead? Okay, great. See, I want you to constantly keep on interacting with me. Just because it's not a face-to-face batch doesn't mean that you can sleep in my class. You have to be 100% diligent. You have to be 100% involved in the class, and only then you will be able to pass the paper. And if you do as I say, I can guarantee that you're going to pass as well, right? So please be interactive. Please be diligent. Please follow what is being told in the class. Okay, so syllabus area A talks about the business organization, its stakeholders, and the external environment in which businesses operate. So let's quickly have a look at what does it mean. Okay, so the chapter 1 talks about characteristics. Sorry, there's a question. Is Aditi Nochmani? Oh, so sorry, Aditi. I've got your correct name now. It just mentioned to me on the chat box that it is written as Shivani Chaturvedi, so I mentioned Shivani to you, but no worries, Aditi. Let me know if you have any queries whatsoever. Okay, so chapter 1, business organizations and their stakeholders. We're going to be learning about characteristics of organizations, different types of organizations like profit and not-for-profit organization, what private sector is all about. What do you mean by limited company, private versus public company, ownership versus control, the private company versus public company, public sector, the NGOs that are there. What do you understand by the term stakeholders? What is Mendelow's power interest matrix? And what is the power of the stakeholders at hand? So we're just going to start off with very simply what is the first topic, that what is an organization, what do you understand by the term organization. And basically, when I'm talking about, I'm talking about a business, an organization, so what do you understand by it? I have been logging in as Ankit Arora, but my real name is Aditi Arora. Okay, that's fine, Ankit. Sorry, Aditi, that's perfectly fine. Please, I request you all to log in with your correct name so that I can actually call out the correct names as well, because otherwise I will not be able to remember who logged in under which name. So next time in the class, please log in with your correct name so that I address you with the correct name, right? Okay. So now let's start with what all organizations have in common. So what do you mean that by the term organization? Any idea? What do you mean by what do you understand by the term organization? So organization is a social arrangement which pursues collective goals. So we set up an organization obviously thinking of a collective goal, thinking of a mission, of a vision that we want to achieve as an organization, right? Which controls its own performance as well as has a boundary separating it from its environment. So these boundaries could literally be physical boundaries or could be social boundaries by calling it, this is an organization, this is a company, this is an enterprise, and which has its own separate legal entity. It is something which is going to, have its own goals, its own objectives, its own mission for which it stands, and is going to be having an internal control system to be able to organize and run the organization in its own unique way. And it's going to be different from the rest of the environment in which there are going to be other organizations as well. So definitely that is what an organization literally is going to be comprising of. So just quick examples of organizations here. So it could be a commercial organization like Reliance Industries. It could be a not-for-profit organization like NGOs that we have, many trusts that we have. It could be a public sector organization like a fire service or the railway department as we call it. It could be a charitable organization like a Save the Children or any other, charitable charity trust that you can name. It could be a trade union wherein you're talking about, unions which are there for the purpose of uplifting the life of the employees. It could be an NGO like the UNICEF, or it could be an accountancy firm like KPMG, Deloitte, EY. So yes, what are these different types of organizations? All of them are organizations, and obviously because they are all of different types, they all exist for a different vision, for a different mission, and all of them have their own ways of operating. So yes, there could be different types of organizations, each having a different objective. So let's have a look at each one of these and some common characteristics which would be there in all types of organization. Obviously, every organization is going to run for a particular purpose, right? It's going to have its own set of, objectives that it is running after. It's going to have its own set of performance matrix or performance assessment that, okay, this is what we want to achieve, whether we've achieved it or not. So it's very simply put, objective of a not-for-profit organization is going to be very, very different from an objective of a for-the-profit organization, right? So very simply put, objective of an NGO or a trust or a charity is going to be very different from what the objective of an accountancy firm like KPMG is going to be, right? So very clearly, there are going to be, some differences, and at the same time, there are going to be some common characteristics as well, because all of these different types of organizations are going to be preoccupied with performance and as well as meeting or improving their standards. So whatsoever type of organization I am, if I'm here, I want to achieve here, right? If I'm here, I want to go there. So every organization have something to look forward to. Every organization has something to, try and gauge and achieve in itself. Organization is going to contain formal documented systems as well as procedures which enable them to control what they actually do. Different people do different things, or they specialize in one activity. So yes, there are going to be organizations which is going to have different people. Every organization is going to have its own procedures of doing things. It's going to have its own systems of doing things. But yes, it could be different from one another, but the basic crux is going to remain the same, right? Every organization is going to have a vision. Every organization would want to improve its performance. Every organization will have its systems and processes as to what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. But yes, every organization is going to have all of these common parameters in the organization. They pursue a variety of objectives as well as goals. Most organizations obtain inputs as well as process them into outputs. So every organization have its own set of inputs. It's gonna have inputs come into the organization. Some sort of processing is done within the organization to be able to create a final output for themselves. So that you can say this process of input, process and output is something which is again common to all different types of organizations, howsoever different these organizations may be, right? Why do organizations exist? Okay, so why do you think organizations exist? Why do we need these different types of organizations? Profit organization, public sector, private sector, not-for-profit, charity, all of these are different types of organizations. But why are these organizations there in the first place? Tell me. Tell me, please. So why do organizations exist? Obviously, every organization exists for a mission, right? Every organization stands for a purpose, and that objective is what they want to achieve, and that is why the organizations exist in the first place. So organizations can achieve results by which individuals cannot achieve by themselves. So we need to come together as a team, as an organization, as a company, as an entity to be able to achieve some common goals. Very rightly identified by Anuj that yes, you need to come together as a unit, as an organization to be able to achieve what probably individually I could not have been able to achieve. Simple example here, if Dhirubhai Ambani had not formed the company, do you think he would have been able to achieve what today Reliance has achieved? Do you think he as an individual, he would have been able to achieve? If today, let's talk about Mark Zuckerberg, would he have been able to achieve individually what he wanted to achieve without, setting up the entire Facebook structure? No, right? Yes. So we need people, group of people to come together with their own individual talents, with their own expertise, as we call them, to coexist as an organization to be able to achieve the overall objective of the organization. So overcome people's individual limitations, whether these are physical limitations or intellectual limitations. Everybody, each team member brings in some sort of value addition. So the people are there who are specialists, so they bring in their own knowledge to be able to ultimately, achieve the common objective or target for which the organization has actually come together for. It helps in saving time, it accumulates as well as share knowledge with each other, as well as bring on synergistic benefits to the organization. So organizations enable people to be more productive, to be able to achieve what they've been able to, what they want to achieve in the organization. Okay, so yes, there are different, there are organizations, there are different types of organizations, and even though there are driving factors which are like common for all organizations, each organization could be different from another organization on the basis of these parameters which are listed on your screen. So there are, one organization A would be different from organization B on the basis of ownership. So who actually owns the organization? Is it only a set of a family ownership is there, or is it is it like a public company wherein there are public at large who are the shareholders of the organization? Basically, who owns the organization? Is it government run? Is it individually held by private individuals? So ownership is going to be different for every organization. Control. similar to who owns the company is going to determine who controls the organization as well. So we know who are the regulators of the company. So if I talk about any organization, if I talk about a banking organization like HDFC, so yes, it's a company, it's a private limited firm which is listed on the stock exchange. However, ultimately there is an authority which determines and controls what a bank can actually do. So there is RBI, which is determining, or the bank has to comply to the regulations of the Reserve Bank of India to be able to run its operations. So yes, there is going to be a control over, which is different for every organization. Activity in terms of, what is it that you're doing? Is it farming? Is it banking? Is it manufacturing? Is it production? Is it services? So yes, every organization is going to differ from other organization in terms of what is it that the organization is offering. Profit or not profit orientation simply means, why am I existing? Is it for a cause? Is it for a purpose, or is it just purely to make profit? So yes, organizations are going to differ from that perspective as well. Legal status, limited companies versus partnerships. So how is it that you are incorporated as an organization? Are you incorporated as a limited company? Are you incorporated as a partnership firm? Are you incorporated as a sole proprietor? So that legal status is going to be different for every organization as well. Size simply would mean that, is it a small family run business? Is it a huge MNC? So yes, every business is going to be different from the other in terms of its size as well. Source of finance simply means that where is the money coming into the organization from? So are they raising debt capital, or are they raising equity capital? So where is it that, the organization is being funded from? Technology in terms of how much is the organization dependent upon technology, how much tech savvy, or you can say dependent upon technology is a particular organization, and how is it that they can actually be moving forward. So how technology driven the organization, its processes, its systems would also be different for every organization, right? Does everybody understand this? Everybody understands this? Okay, great. Okay, so obviously every organization stands for a different purpose, and there could be different types of activities which every organization could actually be running into, right? So it could be an agricultural organization, a manufacturing firm, you could be just extracting raw materials, you could be into the energy department, you could be a retailing or a distributor, you could be, having intellectual production, you could be in a service industry. So yes, these are the different types of activities which every organization can actually head into, and on the basis of what the organizations are doing as well, we can actually bifurcate categories or different types of industries, as we may call it. Very nice and simple and preliminary it is. Okay. Now, profit versus not-for-profit organizations. Does everybody understand this? Have you ever heard of, a profit-oriented business versus a not-for-profit oriented business? So obviously what differs between the two is the overall objective for which the organization is set up, right? A profit-oriented business, the primary objective would obviously be to make profits, would be to maximize these profits, for the owners of the business, who are the shareholders of the business. That can be done in the form of distributing them as dividends to the shareholders or retaining profits with the business. So, but at the end of the day, your primary objective as a profit-oriented firm is to make profits. And the secondary goal obviously would be, how do you achieve it? with, making some goods or services is how you're going to be achieving this. And you obviously require certain inputs like, men, machinery, material to be able to perform this service or this manufacturing, whatsoever you want to do to ultimately achieve your overall objective of making profit. However, there is a not-for-profit organization or non-profit oriented firms, as we call it, whose primary objective is not to, just only make money, is not to just only make profits. They exist, these not-for-profit organizations exist purely for a purpose, purely for a cause, that is to be able to provide service to the public at large. So even if, they're not making profits and the cost of running is high, we still want to go ahead with this not-for-profit, oriented business, because at the end of the day, it is providing a service to the maximum number of humans, right? So the objective here is to provide maximum good to the greatest number of people here. So, services like, you can say, railways. So there's a lot of hue and cry about privatization of railway, but why are we not doing it? Because if we make it privatized, then the entire purpose of being able to provide it as a service to all the common men would actually be, would be defeated. And that is why we don't want to, make it like a profit oriented business. Let it be a not-for-profit oriented business, because we're providing a public service here, right? Everybody understands profit and not-for-profit organizations? Okay, so now we know that for a private sector organization, what is the ultimate objective? The ultimate driving force or the ultimate objective of such a business is to make profits. And how is it that you can actually make it? You could either set up a sole trader, you could either set up a partnership firm, or you could form a limited company for yourself. So all these three categories of types of entity, all are ultimately profit oriented businesses. So if I'm setting up a sole trader business, I'm setting up a partnership, I'm setting up a limited company, my overall objective is to be able to drive profits for my business. What about limited companies? Anybody's heard of the term limited company? So limited company obviously has a separate legal personality. It is different from its shareholders. Shareholders cannot normally be sued for the debts of the business, because even though it is a limited company, it is a separate legal entity. So shareholders, even though they are the owners of the company, ultimately, it is the business you can sue or be sued by, by shareholders and for the debts of the business, and not individual, and not in individual capacity, the owners can be sued. The liability is limited to the amount that they have invested in the business itself. So that is how, we say that a limited company has the risk of the investors, of the entrepreneurs of the business, limited to the amount that they have invested into the business. So this is what is actually called limited liability as well. Private versus public, we know that. So organizations which are not run or run by central or local government could be private companies. Public sectors are generally run by central or local government only, right? So these are organizations which would be broadly like government driven organizations, and thus are called public sector firms. Okay, so let's quickly have a look at this. Let me just ask you a question. Who do you think are the owners of the business? Who are the owners of any private business? Tell me. The shareholders, right? So all equity shareholders are owners of the business. However, and let's just consider it from an example's perspective. Supposingly you are a shareholder of Reliance Industries. You've got some 5,000 shares of Reliance Industries on you. So you literally become a shareholder and you are an owner of the organization. You have literally, provided for the capital. In return of this capital, you receive dividends. You can be selling off your shareholding to receive profits as well. But even if you hold 5,000 shares of Reliance Industries, do you think you are involved in day-to-day management of, what is happening in Reliance Industries? No, right? So then who is running the business if not the shareholders? I thought shareholders were the owners, right? So then who is running the business on behalf of the shareholders? Right, Aditi? Right, Bhavya? Right, Prachi? Right, Sapna? Yes, it is the board of directors who have been delegated with the job of acting as agents of the ultimate owners of the organization, who are the shareholders. So very clearly we can see that even though shareholders are the ones who are actually owning the company, it is the directors of the company who are actually running the business, who are actually, running the business on behalf of the real owners, acting as agents of the organization. Now these directors or the agents of the company can be of two types. Could be an executive director or a non-executive director. Executive directors are the ones who are, day-to-day involved with all the operations of the business. Non-executive directors are the ones who only, don't get themselves involved with on a day-to-day basis with the operations of the organization, but only provide advice to the board of directors as to what they should be going ahead with or what should they not be going ahead with. So we clearly see that there is a separation of ownership of the business versus people who are actually controlling or running the operations of the business. So that is, in a very technical term, if I call it, is called the agency gap, because the real owners of the company are different from the people who are acting as agents of the real owners of the company, who are the directors of the company. Now, let me just put it through you. So, as a shareholder, as the owner of the organization, what would be your objective? What would be your objective from the organization? You would obviously want higher returns, right? So, higher dividends being given out, higher profits being made by the organization would be your objective, right? Very rightly identified by Aditi and Bhavya, that it is going to be more dividends, more profits, right? However, I am not involved with personally, day-to-day operations of the company. It is my agent who is the director of the company, who has all the control to make decisions. What would be the overall objective of the director of the company? What do you think would be the overall objective of the director of the company? So if I am today the director of XYZ company and I'm not the owner of XYZ company, I'm just acting as an employee, as an agent on behalf of somebody else. My objective would be obviously to make sure that my own set of remuneration is big fat, right? My objective would be to get a healthy remuneration, to carry away, to walk out with big fat bonuses. And so if that is what is actually happening, so the objectives of the owners is different from the objectives of the directors, of the agents of the company. There is this gap between these objectives, which is called the agency gap. Now, as businesses, your objective is to actually align this gap, to be able to make sure that objectives of the organizational directors align with the objectives of the ultimate owners of the organization. How we'll do that, I'll come to that later on. But I just wanted you to understand that yes, ownership and control is different in organizations, right? Okay, so very quickly we've got some differences between private limited companies and public limited companies on your screens. I want everybody to please quickly go through these. Quickly read them through, please. Let me know if something is not clear, because it's very simple. Private companies versus public companies. Let me quickly show you a quick video on this. I always feel that, seeing visually actually leaves a longer impression. Okay, so very quickly we're going to just have a quick look at a good animation video explaining the difference between the two. It's very, very simple. I'm sure you've all done it at your elementary level. So we don't want to get any deeper into what is required. Okay, let me just share the link with you on the chat box and also share sound. Okay, done. There you are.
Step in finding information about a specific company is determining whether that company is private or public. A private company is often owned by an individual or a small group of individuals. They do not sell stock to the general public and so are not obligated to file their financial statements or other documents with the Securities Exchange Commission or the SEC. They do file some documents with the IRS and various state agencies, mostly related to taxes. A public company is owned by many individuals who have purchased company stocks. These stocks are available to the general public and can be found on an exchange like the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. Public companies are required to file a variety of documents with the SEC, such as a 10-K and an 8-K. Access to these documents allows stockholders to make good decisions about their investment in the company. The public availability of company documents also makes it much easier to research public companies than private companies. It's important to remember that the size of the company does not matter. A small company can be public and a large company can be private. For example, Winmark Corporation, the company that owns Plato's Closet, is a public company. On the other hand, Dell, the computer technology company, is a private company. You also need to know whether a company is the parent company or if it is a subsidiary of another company. A subsidiary is a company that has at least 50% of its stock controlled by a parent company. Even if the parent company is public, there is usually less information available about subsidiaries, so you may need to scale up and find whatever information you can on the parent company instead. The easiest way to determine whether a company is
Okay, that is something that is not required. I just wanted to very quickly show you a difference between a public company and a private company. So we all know this now. So the name, how you actually put down the name of a public company is PLC and a private company is always a limited firm. Number of shareholders for a private company would obviously be limited and the public at large can buy and sell shares in a public company. Transferability of shares is obviously something that is being exchanged between the major shareholders or the directors as we can call of the company, and however of the public limited company would be it can be bought and sold by the general public at large as well. And if I talk about directors as shareholders, the founder, family and friends, and venture capitalists, the people who are generally designated as directors of the company. In public companies, you could actually hold some shares as well. Sources of capital here, you would actually be looking at how saleable or what is the limited market sale which is required to consent of the shareholders, and as a public limited company as well, you need to be able to arrange for various sources of avenue to be able to find out and incorporate your operations. So yes, that is what primary is, private limited versus public limited. Everybody okay with it? It's nice and simple. I'm sure everybody understands the difference between the two. Any questions here? Anything anybody would like to ask? Okay. Great. So now let's understand that how is it basically an organization or a company, what is the life of a company. So the first thing is you literally start as a small family business. You set up a private company for yourself. Slowly and gradually as the business grows, you obviously now need more funds than your initially invested funds of your own self or your family and friends funds which you had initially invested. You now literally need more funds for further expansion. When that happens, a private company could actually go in for listing. That is, a private company is now going in to become a publicly traded company on the stock exchange. So you could become a PLC now, and for further growth, you obviously need to expand your operations, enhance your business processes to be able to get more and more funds from the investors of the organization. So that this is the typical way in which an organization actually operates. We all know this, right? So let me give you a quick example here. So when Facebook actually started, it was a small business, right? It was a small privately owned firm. Slowly with the growth of the organization, what happened? Facebook went public, right? It launched its shares to the public at large, got itself listed, it became a PLC, and now you can literally be a Facebook, you can literally buy and sell shares of Facebook company in the US. So it's as simple as that. Similarly, if I take an Indian example, we started off with Dhirubhai Ambani starting off Reliance, and slowly and gradually, it's become again a PLC company wherein you can easily today itself buy and sell shares and become a shareholder of the Reliance Industries. Right? Everybody understands this? Why do you think a business, a small family run or a private entrepreneur will go public? Will actually, kind of sell out its business or sell out its shareholding to the public at large? Obviously, why? Tell me. Why would that happen? Because what do you need in return? For funds for further growth. Yes, absolutely right. So to be able to arrange for more funds for expansion, a private company may go public. Right? Okay, so advantages. Why do you think, what are the apparent advantages of an organization becoming a limited company? Obviously, you've got now more money available for investment. The risk is reduced because this company, when it becomes a limited company, it becomes a limited liability company as well, wherein your risk is only restricted to the amount of money that you have actually put into the business. It's a separate legal entity. Obviously, it is something that you can buy property in the company's name. You can make and do legal contracts in the company's name. So yes, it's a separate legal entity in its own self. Ownership is legally separated from control. There is no restriction in size. You can literally, grow more and more and more and more. There is no limitation to the size of a limited company, and absolutely it brings in more flexibility in the form of more avenues, more funds, more capital, which is now available to the organization. Right? So definitely, there are many advantages of an organization becoming a limited company. Right? Please let me know. Feel free to drop in, a message in the chat box if there's absolutely anything you want me to repeat at any point of time. Is that okay? So, what about disadvantages then? What are the disadvantages of, going public at large or converting into a limited company? obviously you now have to comply to the regulations, right? If you're listed on the stock exchange, you have to comply to SEBI's regulations. You just cannot, overrun the compliances of the regulations that are required for you to comply to. Shareholders have little practical power, because even if like I have 10 shares in Reliance, do I literally have any power? No, I don't, right? So even if I am the shareholder, it is going to be dependent upon, and it is literally, I can only, the only power I can literally exercise is I can worst to worst, sell off my shares if I do not want to be associated with the organization anymore, right? Okay, so just few examples given here of a private company. Public sector. We all know what a public sector is, right? So public sector is, entities which comprises the all organizations owned and are run by the government. So these are, services that we are providing to the government by the government at large towards the public at large. So these are called public sector organizations, like, your armed forces, your government schools and universities, your government departments, right? Railways, you can consider public services like street lighting, health and safety, fire services, the police service. All of these are public sector entities, right? Everybody understands this, right? Very, very basic. Key characteristics of public sector. Obviously, it is government owned, so the accountability is also towards the government at large. You can be raising funds for yourself by raising the taxes, because it is government funded, right? How does government collect money? By levying taxes on individuals like you and me, by levying taxes on organizations, on private companies, on the profits that they have earned. So you could obviously raise, more taxes. You could make, making some charges, or you could be borrowing from, other sources wherein if you need to arrange for more funds. Demand for services in private sector, this will be determined by price. In public sector, demand for services would be practically limitless. Limited resources, because see, even if we know that, it is a service like the railways industries, if I talk about, it is a service which is, hugely in demand. However, each of these service has an allocated budget towards it, right? Has a set budget which the government has allocated towards these public sectors, and they have to manage their operations within that particular, specified budget for themselves. So yes, it is, having a limited resource in itself. Thereafter, advantages, public sector, obviously you all know that, the various advantages that it brings across. It's a service. It is something which, is being given to all the individuals at large. So it's fair service. You're trying to fill in the gaps by, providing a service, and everything is not, being run purely on the basis of profitability here. It is trying to fill in the gaps which are left by the private sector. It is something which is in the greater good of the maximum number of people. So yes, there is public interest attached with it. Economies of scale, which simply mean that, because it's a centralized purchasing power is in the hands of the government. So whatsoever purchases the government will be doing will be bulk purchases, right? So when we make bulk purchases, we end up getting bulk discounts for ourselves as well. So yes, it's a cheaper source of finance which is available and does bring in efficiency in terms of the operations that are there. Why? Because here the objective is not just to make money, but to provide a service to the individuals that you are catering to, right? Everybody understands these advantages? Please let me know if there's anything that you want me to explain to you. It's very, very simplistic. So just consider the railway department and consider, all the advantages that it brings across. Disadvantage, obviously would be huge costs which is involved, would be, literally, sometimes taxpayers can feel that their money is getting wasted in, in providing this service. So accountability could definitely be an issue, and interference, political interference is something that you just cannot, differentiate, or you can separate whenever you're providing a public service. So there will always be interference coming in from political boundaries, coming in from the government, that will influence, your decisions, your, what to do and how to do always as a public sector unit, right? Any doubts here? What about others? NGOs, we all know what an NGO stands for, right? So these the key facts involved that these are bodies which are directly linked to national government, Their aim is again not to make profits, but to provide some sort of service to the humanity, that it is majorly based on humanitarian grounds. So the political, social, political or environmental change as its aim would be, just to provide a service for the maximum number of good, for the maximum number of people, without being, convinced, without being, looking at facts that, it is not linked to a government body, but at the same time, there is no profit criteria that you have. It's like a trust that, you are having. So there will be no political parties considered here, because here, the objective of non-governmental organizations, NGOs, is very separate to what the government-run public sector organizations are like. So here, even if it's not linked to the government, you're not, trying to make a profit, but to provide a service. So the raise funds, how do they raise funds then? Because it's not government linked, you obviously cannot be collecting taxes, right? However, you would be hugely dependent upon, sources of funds like donations, like people coming in voluntarily to provide, themselves as labor. So all of these donations or voluntary work coming in is how you would be arranging for, resources to be able to carry out your NGO, right? Everybody understands this? It's very basic. Quickly go through the features then. Quickly go through the features of NGO, written on your screen. An obvious example would be organizations like the UNICEF. Everybody knows what UNICEF is, right? I need not elaborate it further. Then there is another type of organization which is called a cooperative society or mutual associations, wherein, these businesses which are owned by their workers or the customers who share the profit. So they come together as a society, join hands and, create a mutual association for themselves for the benefit of all of its members per se. So there is an open membership, there is democratic control in the form that, every member has an equal opportunity to be heard. So it means one member, one vote. Distribution of surplus in proportion to the purchases in the form of it, you're just trying to provide this collection of goods and services that you have to promote education, to provide a cause, to provide, any objective that you have as an association together, as a cooperative society together. So you're there together for a particular purpose, right? Simple example. Now there's this link given here. This is, just having a list of all the cooperative societies which are there. And they definitely are providing, they have members, right? Remember the difference here is that they provide a range of services. they have members and not shareholders, and each of these members, each member is democratic in the form that each member has one voting right attached to it. Then we have mutual associations, so similar to what we call as a cooperative society. They are owned by the members rather than any outside investor. So they are members who are actually holding membership of the mutual association. Credit unions are examples of mutual associations. These are financial institutions which are owned as well as controlled by their members. So basically it's an association of owners who are the members coming together, and no outsider who is not an owner or who is not a member can actually join in this mutual association. Right? Any doubts? Any doubts? Anything anybody would like to ask her in these different types of organizations that we've done today? Any queries? Please feel free to ask. Bhavya says no. Prachi says no. What about others? Okay. So that's a no from everyone. Okay, good. So it's a good time to break and wind up today's session then. Before we actually begin the next class, I want everybody to be able to arrange for books for themselves. So please, again, I am reiterating the numbers. Please reach out on this number and arrange for BPP books for yourself. Right? Okay, then I shall see you in the next class then. Till then, thank you so much for today's session. And I shall see you guys in the next class, which is going to be day after tomorrow. Just one request I have here is that your homework for the next class is just to revise the very basic introduction chapter that we've just started today. We've literally not done much because I was focusing more on the exam and the technique today, and we've just literally started off with chapter 1. But whatsoever we've done, you must revise it at the end of the day, right? So make sure that before you come to your next class, you have the books on you and you have revised this concept from your books. So Sapna, these notes, actually, I think you can see that, it's an entire slideshow of your entire curriculum which is going to be there. So it's like 1007 slides which are there, which is going to encompass all the syllabus. So I'm going to be sending across these notes, will be updated on the LMS itself for you, and I'll arrange for the team to actually share these on email as well with you. But make sure that, this is like everything in one go. That's broken down, you can say very categorically and very thoughtfully broken down. So you can just refer to it from there then, right? Okay then, thank you so much for today's session, and let's meet in the next class. And I shall be asking for your valuable feedbacks. So please feel free to drop in your whatsoever good, bad or ugly feedback you have regarding the class, because no point in me talking if you're not able to understand. We are always open for, a dialogue and improvisation, and we together have to come in and meet at a point wherein you are able to understand what I'm saying. And even if I've got I know the concepts or the subjects, you could probably have a better way in which I could be able to make you understand. So please, I'm open to all sorts of feedbacks, and that's it then. Thank you so much. Bye bye guys.